Chair, you have a live mic.
All right, thank you, Ms. Patterson. I guess we need to do a cleanup motion. Sure.
What we would request, appreciate the board voted to not accept the official interpretation, but the code says the board would, approve, reject, or approve with modifications. So we would request that the board reject the official interpretation, finding no substantial competent evidence. And also, if the board wishes to, following up on the discussion by the board, that neighborhood means a limited geographic area or neighborhood. And we would request that to clean up the record.
Mr. Bosley?
And that is always an option of the Board of County Commissioners to modify, either agree or disagree or modify the interpretation. If that's the direction of the board, staff will follow whatever that direction is.
Mr. Klaskow, do you have a comment on it?
I know what the board did, and it was implicit in your motion, but if Mr. Pierce is uncomfortable with it and wants a clarifying motion, I'm indifferent.
Okay.
And I request it be an explicit motion to reject the official interpretation as not being supported by competent substantial evidence. That's one of the choices the code has.
I'll make the motion to get it moving. Mike, I'm sorry.
There was three specific things that the appeal asked for. He asked for it to be limited geographic area that is only a specific distance from it. In his request for an appeal, you sided with the appellant. My understanding is the three conditions that he put forward that he wanted to define what condition use number 7 is what the board was directing staff to incorporate within our interpretation.
No, we weren't, I don't think that we were considering the 1,000 feet, 500 feet, or anything like that. We just wanted to say that it was for that community, for that specific community, with no specific parameters. Lakewood's Lakewood, Imperial's Imperial. You know, it's just a common sense thing. And we just wanted to clear the language up with the community center saying neighborhood community center.
If I may, Mr. Chairman and board, I apologize, but the code says upon hearing the appeal, the board can reject the official interpretation, finding there's no substantial competent evidence for the official interpretation. That's what we're asking the board to make that determination. I guess it's just that it's implicit, but it's not explicit. And we request to be explicit.
So the motion, Commissioner Colwell?
Okay, I'll make a motion then, and we'll see. A motion to reject the original interpretation is not being based on a competent, substantial evidence, and find that the word neighborhood means basically neighborhood, like Imperial or Riviera Gulf Estates. That's my motion.
We have a lawyer in the audience who has his hand up. I think that means he wants to say something. Is that? I know. I was just kind of stalling things until.
You want to say something, Rich? Sure. We're just hammering out details.
Because even Mr. Pierce acknowledged that there were multiple neighborhoods within the Lakewood community. So is it just he said that in his argument that I think there were 7 or 8, am I right, Tony? Neighborhoods?
9.
9 neighborhoods within. So do you mean just one neighborhood, the closest neighborhood, or do you mean the community? Because I think you guys were talking about community being
Lakewood
the Lakewood community.
Lakewood is Lakewood.
But he says it's the Lakewood community. Am I right, Tony? I'm not trying to, I just want to make sure that you're being so specific when you said neighborhood means neighborhood. Because his definition of neighborhood was really, really.
I'm just trying to play catch up. I thought we already took care of this.
I thought you did too.
But if I may, Mr. Chairman and board, I'm just trying to get an explicit ruling of rejecting the official interpretation. And then if the board wants to give further direction later on, but the explicit, the code says that the board has the ability to reject the official interpretation, finding no substantial competent evidence. We would like that action by the board.
All right. I'll amend my motion then, if I can do so.
Sure.
All right, make a motion to reject the original interpretation as not being based on competent, substantial evidence.
Second. All in favor? Aye? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Same motion carries, just different words.
They're coordinated adjectives.
Commissioners, that brings us to item 17C, now item 9D. This is a recommendation to adopt an ordinance amending the Collier County Land Development Code to establish provisions for food truck parks and mobile food dispensing vehicles. This is being moved to the regular agenda by each commissioner's separate request, and Mr. Bosey is here to present.
Good afternoon, Mike Bosey, Planning and Zoning Director. Before you today, we have the proposed LDC amendments related to how the county will handle food truck and food truck parks moving forward. We had a recommendation, some modifications that were provided by DSAC, a recommendation of approval and slight modifications related to fire lanes that came from the Planning Commission. We had no public opposition to the proposal, and we placed it on your summary agenda. A couple days ago, Mr. Yovanovich and Mr. Wayne Arnold submitted some material asking for some changes to the proposed ordinance, and want to provide the board the opportunity to weigh in on those proposed changes to get some direction. The way that we've had it proposed right now in the C2 or C3, C4, and C5 zoning district, if the food truck did not contain alcohol sales and amplified sound permit, it would be a permitted use. If it contained alcohol and or the amplified sound, it would be a conditional use. It's been suggested by Mr. Yovanovich that in the C3, C4, and C5, that all of them should be proposed as conditional uses to provide for an extra layer of protection and an extra analysis of compatibility to make sure that nothing will crop up from the development of these food trucks. We also have a provision that within the C1, C2, or C3 categories, C3, C4, C5 categories, that 2 or less trucks could go in as a matter of right, not as a food truck, but just as standalone trucks as well. Not sure if the Board of County Commissioners had any issue with that, but I don't think that has been addressed by Mr. Yovanovich's letter. Wanted to see what the appetite of the Board of County Commissioners was regarding those individual changes.
Say that again. So 2 trucks could go in by right?
Two trucks or less could go in by right within the C3, C4, C5 zoning district as an accessory use to the primary use on the property.
Commissioner LaCastro.
Thank you, Chair. I actually sent a note immediately to Ms. Patterson to pull this, and I'm glad to see the other commissioners' thoughts. So I hadn't seen Mr. Ivanovich's letter yet, but then when I saw it, there was most of what was in the letter I agreed with, and it made me think back to the last time we talked about food trucks and what we all sort of collectively said, which was we want to have closer oversight that a food truck park, whether it's 2 trucks or 5 trucks or 8 trucks, they're all a bit different. I remember us talking about we don't really have our hands around, what a food truck park could turn into, and we reference Celebration Park. I always say the people that love Celebration Park are usually the people that don't live near it, and so I didn't want to see anything on the summary agenda that made looser approval of food truck parks. I don't think 10 of them are going to come to us every meeting, and maybe in a year we could write something that maybe once we get a little bit more knowledge and we feel more comfortable that we haven't just let these things plop around. And when I met with the staff, hearing that there's single food trucks all over one particular district, which I won't name here, but that commissioner probably knows, that have popped up with minimal to no approvals, but they're kind of in an okay spot and it's not a big deal. And that's not the way the county should work. So to me, if it's, if we want to have something that allows one truck, there should be some verbiage. To me, 2 trucks or more is a park, or could be. And then when we spoke, privately in my office, Mr. Bosey and, Mr. French and Ms. Scott were there. My concern is these things, 2 food trucks park in a parking lot seems like no big deal. But then somebody has a birthday party there, on a Friday night. And so then they hire a band and then we get a million emails that the noise is too much, even though, it's written in there, no music, no nothing. And so, my thought was these things are still pretty fresh. I don't think it costs us too much to have these things be vetted a little bit until we really get a better feel for it. And then I also think the ones that were brought to my attention that are just sort of parking outside of restaurants and sitting there until somebody says something, we need to take a look at those, because when we send a signal to the restaurateurs that, hey, Bob parked his food truck there, it's been there for 6 months and nobody said anything. That's how these things pop up, and then they start to grow. You talk to citizens around Celebration Park, they never thought it would turn into what some people tell me, and I agree, is sort of like an outdoor seed to table. And I'm not saying they're breaking any laws or anything, but boy, we sure do get a lot of pushback. And then we even hear from our own staff when we had this conversation before about food trucks that, wow, it sort of got bigger than what we kind of thought it would be. So I pulled it just because I wanted to have a discussion, and maybe that, I said this to you, Mr. Bosey, I'm not, my position isn't to be directive to you and say, here's what it should say, but I'd feel a lot better if the staff took a look at it a little bit deeper and came back with more detailed verbiage that would give us better oversight for any of these requests that were sort of bigger than a bread box. And I think it's most of them, and it's not a big number. So I remember one time a commissioner that used to sit here, Commissioner Solis, one time he said at a meeting, I don't even know if I was elected, and he says, I don't want to be approving a food truck parking at every single meeting, we should leave that to the staff. We're not going to get that many, but I think, I'll just speak for my district, District 1, I'd like to have tighter oversight so I know where they're going. I want to make sure the constituents are pleased with it, and that they're not just, I'm not going to just drive by one day and so, wow, where did that come from? And then find out from the staff, oh, remember when you thinned out the rules? Well, they're not in violation of anything. It's okay. So that's why I pulled it. Seeing other names of commissioners there, I'd love to hear from the other commissioners. Maybe they pulled it for a different reason, but I pulled it because I really wanted something more detailed to come back from the staff that would give us more oversight and visibility and tighter control and approval. I'm not saying, we shoot down every food truck park, but that was my reasoning, so.
So before I go to Commissioner McDaniel and then Commissioner Kowal's on deck, in staff meetings yesterday, you explained it very well about, the taco truck and when he just shows up, and then when a permit's required, and then versus the continual use or by right.
And we have a provision towards where if it's a food truck park, just parking at a establishment for 4 hours or less, there's no permit that would be required. If there's the second stage above that is the accessory food truck that's at a establishment that permits food truck parks. Those can be permitted through a site development plan improvement or a site development plan in substantial change for 1 or 2 food trucks. And it sounds like there is some concern about.
How long would that permit last?
Permanently. And then the third tier is your food truck park, and those are the ones that we're proposing in C3, C4, and C5. Like I said, we had a differential. If you had amplified music and alcohol sales, that's a conditional use. If you had if those weren't present, they could be permitted. It sounds like, at least from one commissioner, would agree with Mr. Yovanovich, would like to see all of those food truck parks be placed as a conditional use for the Board of County Commissioners to evaluate whether it's an appropriate use or not.
Yes. Commissioner McDaniel.
One other one would too. I also want to be very careful and distinguish between permittable uses and illegal uses. The abuse that happens with food trucks at large is rampant. We've got a lot of, and we just had a discussion about neighborhoods and where the comma is and what the proper adjective was. But neighborhood commercial is different than C3, C4, C5. But that doesn't mean that a C4, C3, C4, C5 isn't in a neighborhood. Then we have people, I have people taking advantage of that. They park a food truck in their parking lot, theoretically by right, and then start consuming parking spaces that are available for a restaurant, and then push the parking for other commercial properties that are in close proximity away and start taking advantage of other people's property rights for the utilization of their own property by consuming land that's over here because they haven't necessarily done what they needed to do with the proper SDP. And so I think we're not going to get overwhelmed with these things, and if we do, we can make a change at some particular stage. But I would individually, this is very, to me, this is, they have the right to ask, but we need to see what those impacts are on the nearby surrounding area to be able to make a determination and put limitations on noise and alcohol and parking and so on and so forth.
Commissioner Cowell.
Thank you, Chair. I definitely know the difference between a roach coach and a mobile. You show up at the work sites at lunchtime, and you get a hot meal if you can, and I don't have a problem with that. And they're mobile, and I think it comes down again mobile versus non-mobile. I mean, we have mobile homes that have been on blocks for 40 years. It's still called a mobile home, and sometimes these food trucks find a home in a parking lot somewhere, and they're not truly mobile. They're there permanently, and I know I just want to get more insight. Maybe you can help me. Is let's say Commissioner Saunders' district, for instance. I'm familiar with the Tiki Hut that serves the beer and the wine in the parking lot. In the evening hours, that being a parking lot, being a C3, I think it is, or whatever that particular plaza is, they would be able to have a food truck come set up there, in the way it's written now. But who would watch to make sure they don't get a temporary amplified sound permit for one night or something like that? Because then it would kind of circumvent the process of saying, well, these are just allowed because they're not going to have amplified sound and not alcohol. But they are catering to a business that serves alcohol and that because they don't provide food. So what safeguard do we have that this isn't going to be a reoccurring thing in a property that's very close to residential property like Commissioner Saunders' district?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Eric Johnson, for the record, Planning Manager. So I think what you're asking about are mobile food dispensing vehicles that are accessory to an already established principal use.
Yes.
And if so one or two wanted to come in, there are some standards that are proposed right now. And if they wanted to sell alcohol or have...
No, that's not what I said.
Oh, sorry.
They don't sell alcohol. They don't have amplified sound. But the business that doesn't provide food does serve alcohol. Like I used that example was at Tiki Hut, which doesn't have a restaurant connected to it. It just serves beer and wine license in a parking lot. But then they want food service through a food truck, and then they get an amplified sound permit for the one evening every Friday night, temporary. How do we control that?
Well, the principal use would be allowed to continue to sell their alcohol as they normally would. The accessory use mobile dispensing vehicle would be allowed there by right, as long as they're not having any amplified sound associated with outdoor entertainment or selling alcohol from that particular unit. However, I think...
So we would have a provision there say, well, are you a food truck and you're asking for a temporary sound permit, and we deny them?
If they're a food truck and they want to have amplified sound associated with outdoor entertainment...
Temporary.
Yep.
People can do that, even for your home.
We would consider
If you
one
throw
day
a party,
temporary.
you have to get a permit for a
Yeah.
temporary amplified sound permit.
We would consider temporary to be something that would require a comparable use determination that would go to the hearing examiner. We also have a temporary use permit that allows these mobile food dispensing vehicles to be at a particular site for no more than 28 days within a calendar year. There's also exceptions where the Board of County Commissioners would be able to have, under certain circumstances, to be able to increase the number of days beyond that 28 days. I don't know if I answered your question.
I think I was just more on the grounds of, are we going to be able to have the ability to supervise this in a way that they're not getting this temporary sound permit, even though they're a food truck, and they're telling you they don't serve alcohol and they don't have sound, but they're obtaining it for that particular evening, you know, because it's a Friday night and they're entertaining. So that's what I guess that's where I'm going at with.
I mean, the language right now just has it where if they want to have it for 1 day or more, that would require a comparable use determination. But we
Okay,
could
so
make
you kind of answered my question.
which would go to the hearing examiner.
Okay.
Now, we could structure it so that if they want to apply for a temporary use permit for a day or 2 days or under, you know, within the constraints of that, that could also be a means to accomplish that. Depends on what you want. The way we have it structured.
What I'm trying to do is you're saying it's by right because they don't have music and they don't serve alcohol.
Yes.
But if they circumvent the system by running down and getting a temporary permit for a Friday or Saturday night, now they basically pulled one over on you, and they are having amplified music, and they're by right there. That's all I'm trying to say. Is there any way or mechanism we're going to have in place that this won't happen?
We would want to, if they were going to have it just 1 day or more, that would be a comparable use determination.
Okay.
That's even above and beyond the temporary use permit.
All right.
That's a public hearing.
Commissioner McDaniel.
Henceforth, conditional use, whether it's 1 or 10 or 2. I mean, the second circumstance that's becoming very prevalent as well is containers, shipping containers. They're wrapping them and then dumping them, dropping them off, and calling them food trucks. We had. I think over in Immokalee, I have four, now those aren't legally permitted, but that's what they're doing is they're calling them food trucks and dumping them, putting them on commercially zoned vacant lots. Now, they don't have permits, they're not legal, and it's a distinguishment between the two, but the concern I have is I just don't want to do a by right conversion of commercial to an entirely separate use without having the capacity to say no. If we do that by right, it happens.
Understood. And we could structure it so that any instance of these things would require conditional use approval.
That's a simple answer for me.
And what I would say is we do have a provision for a temporary use permit. We issued at a variety of special events temporary use for food trucks, but those are only limited to 28 days, and they have to be, there's a tight window towards where they could, could operate. So what I'm hearing from the Board of County Commissioners, bring you something back that any proposed food truck would require conditional use. And what I'm hearing, do you want that to go to the HEX with the discretion of the Board of County Commissioners, or do you want that just to come to the Board of County Commissioners?
In my personal opinion, it can go to the HEX. We have the right, if one gets approved by the HEX that there is issues with, or that we can always pull it and appeal that decision. I mean, it certainly would streamline the process to allow it to go to the HEX. We've already determined that we all have the right to appeal that decision and or that process even in midstream. I'm okay with it going to the HEX.
Commissioner LaCastro.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm okay with it going to the HEX as well because, I mean, as involved commissioners, you have to monitor what's going to the HEX if it's something like a food truck. And I mean, I had one in my district that got approved by the HEX, and then I was like, no, not so fast, and then I brought it back here. So I'm good with that. What I would just like to see, and I don't know if this is a motion direction or I've even got support from my fellow commissioners here, I would like to see what you just said, Mr. Bosey, is take what we've set up here, and I'd like to just see better verbiage. The reason I pulled this, I just didn't like the verbiage. It seemed very thin and loose. And last we talked about food trucks, we wanted to, not tighter control, but better oversight. And what I read that was in the agenda seemed, and then I saw Mr. Yovanovitch's letter, and I thought, yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. He just said it better. And so I would just like to see something come back to us and then see if we all agree. But I think most people up here, want to have better oversight of the food trucks, and we're already hearing that some people are already circumventing the system. Bring us some verbiage that allows that to not happen as much, so that we can do something about it. And like I said in my offices, you said maybe it was Mr. Bosey, you were like, there's more than a few people circumventing it. Well, then let's get some verbiage in there so that, then our code enforcement folks can do something about it and maybe are supported a little bit more, possibly.
And I understand we will bring that back. What I will say is any of those food trucks that haven't been permitted on a temporary basis, or if they've been there permanent and they haven't gone through the process, those are illegal. Those aren't endorsed by by this code. So if a code enforcement officer is alerted towards it, we can most certainly take action. But we will come back with a process that requires a conditional use process for all food trucks, whether food truck or food truck parks. We also allow for the temporary use permit for that 28 days, but we'll bring it back based upon the contours of what you guys would like and see if we met the mark with that.
That's what I was looking for.
That's fine with me. Do we need a motion or?
Do we need a motion for that, or we just give direction?
Direction's fine.
It's perfect.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I do have two registered speakers. Richard Jovanovich and Wayne Arnold.
Right. Right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Was there a rumble out in the parking lot? Mr.
No, but-
Posey's got his jacket off. Did something happen during lunch? Did something happen?
Mr. Jovanovich may want to hear again where you said that he said it better.
Yeah. Well, I didn't really mean that. He said it different, as Commissioner McDaniel always says. I'm going to say it different. Same thing, but different.
What's
yeah.
next, Ms. Patterson?
Commissioners, that brings us to item 10B. This is a recommendation to hear the reconsideration of the McDowell Housing Partners Ecos on Collier project approval of workforce housing land acquisition surtax funding made during discussion of item 11B at the January 23rd, 2024 BCC meeting. Mr. Cormac Giblin, your Director of Housing and Economic Development, is here to present.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Again, for the record, Cormac Giblin. I'm just going to give a brief background of how we got here and then turn it over to the McDowell team to give a little bit more in-depth presentation. On January 23rd, we brought to you an item to recommend using $3.75 million of your workforce housing land acquisition surtax funding to purchase a site off of Collier Boulevard, about a half mile south of US 41. That is about 7.5 acres. McDowell's proposal was to build, or is to build, 160 affordable apartment units with a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms, and a mix of income targets between 30 and 80% of area median income. At your last meeting, on the February 13th meeting, you entertained a motion to reconsider, which was approved, and that's why we're back here today, with an ear towards answering some certain questions that were outstanding in terms of zoning and buffers and water management and some other development-specific criteria. The process from here would be that McDowell, should they move forward, would continue with their site development plan process. Once that plan is approved, and also all the ancillary adjoining permits from the Water Management District, DEP, or FDEOT, any other agencies that need to weigh in on the project have approved it, we would come back to you with a purchase agreement, a developer agreement, and a long-term land lease for the county to officially acquire the property and enter in a partnership with McDowell. Just a little bit more background: the property is zoned C3. Their plan is to use the new Live Local Act to allow housing that is affordable to be built on it. It's adjacent to a C4 property, which has a maximum height allowable of 75 feet. And the maximum density allowed would be 92 units to the acre using the Live Local process. McDowell has, their plans call for a building of only 70 feet and only 21 units to the acre. With that, unless you have any more questions for staff, I'll turn it over to McDowell to go through how they've addressed some of the outstanding questions in their design.
Thank you, Cormac.
Hey, good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you so much for getting us back here as quickly as you did. We've done a lot of work over the last 2 weeks. We made a lot of progress and have some interesting things to show you. Talked to Commissioner McDaniel on some of his concerns in more detail. We've chatted with some of the community just here today and understand some of the concerns, and I think you'll be very pleased to see how we've amended a few things and really tried to highlight what we're going to do from an engineering perspective to mitigate the environmental concerns. Today I do have here with me Davidson Engineering. I have Ryan White, who's been our lead engineer on the project, and so he will do much better at discussing the technical details and construction engineering methodologies we're using when it relates to stormwater management. Let's see if I can work this. So just to be clear on the representative image here, this is a representative image. This is not by any means the design or the final design of what we're proposing. At this point, we're focused on the site development, not the vertical development. Vertical development will follow once we have our footprint and know what we're ultimately doing with the site. One of the big questions was development programming. And I just wanted to put a few things on the record to be clear on the unit mix. We do have a mix of 30% AMI units, 50% AMI units, and 80% AMI units. These will be locked in due to the tax credit financing, which requires a 15-year compliance period. So we are locked into those set-asides at the point of closing our tax credit financing for a period of 15 years. The ground lease, however, will run for a period of 99 years, and there is an opportunity to revisit after that point, but I just want to be clear and on the record here that we don't have the ability to adjust these. And we do have a 50-year extended period where the rents will always be subject to a maximum of 80%. So there is no opportunity for us unless we wanted to have a major recapture of our investment and a guarantee obligation called that we would ever be able to take this to, unrestricted market rate rents or to condominiumize the project. We do have the rent and incomes listed here. I know it's a little small. Happy to provide those in a more legible format, but just wanted to provide that to give you some idea of what those income and rent limits are and who will be serving, similar to our property that we just recently developed in partnership, very similar to this proposal, Ecos on Santa Barbara. Those 80% rents do reach a number of county administrative staff as well. So it kind of goes from there down to 30%, which is the lower end of the income bracket, which is really a lot of seniors living on fixed incomes, veterans living on those fixed incomes that they have. So runs between that and essential service personnel. So the site plan, this is where you're going to see a lot of changes. If you look closely at the top of the page where it says preserve area, that preserve was not there previously. So we've heard some of the feedback, and these are the things that we want to address. We want to address the environmental concerns over the impacts of stormwater, specifically in relation to Henderson Creek. We want to address the traffic flows and patterns. We want to address the parking and, I guess, correspondingly, the height as it relates to the parking. And as you can see here, the site plan, you look similar, but there's quite a few things that have changed in the thought through those specific concerns. The preserve area, as you can see, has shifted from being adjacent to Henderson Creek now to, because that would be the east side of the site. And there's a development, a condominium development. It's a 2-story condominium, I believe, on the other side of the property line of the preserve. And so the idea of relocating the preserve was to provide a natural vegetated buffer between the existing residents of that condominium development and our building, provide something that will be there. That site will not be developed. It will have a conservation easement over it. And so that provides a significant buffer between the two projects. And if you're sitting in your backyard in the condominium and look up, you're going to see the tree line. Undoubtedly, you will see some building, but it's not going to be looming over you. In addition, we moved the clubhouse towards the Henderson Creek. There will be, as you can see, there is no public access. That is something that we were kicking around in concept. Certainly not something that we have committed to in any way, shape, or form, and are happy to say here today that we will not have any public access down to Henderson Creek. In fact, we won't even have a dock. What we will have is just our amenity area backing up to the creek and being able to put some seating along the bank just for our residents' enjoyment, but that'll be the extent of it. The other two things that I think are important in this site plan are the 2 points of ingress and egress. So as you can see, we have an access point on Henderson Creek. We have an access point on 951 Collier Boulevard. The access to the site can come in either one of those. There's a full median cut on the 951 ingress egress on Collier Boulevard. And then if residents were to pull into the site onto Henderson Creek, there is, on 951, there is a deceleration lane that buffers them from the traffic going towards Marco that they would pull into, and it stacks a number of cars. So that's where folks who are currently living in the community, in the trailer park community there, and the homes that are there in the condominiums, they pull into that deceleration lane, turn left onto Henderson Creek to enter onto the street. That would stay the same. However, what we were proposed to do is to put a sign up that there is no exit from there. So therefore, in the mornings at high levels of traffic, you're not going to see a lot of cars from our community going onto Henderson Creek to turn left onto Henderson to turn right onto Collier. Naturally, because we have the curb cut on Collier, they're going to come right out onto Collier Boulevard and go towards 41, maybe some traffic towards Marco, but in the morning generally going towards 41 as well. So I hope that provided some detail. Again, Davidson Engineering's here, who will talk a little bit more about how we finalize that with FDOT and the process and procedure that we still have to go through. Cormac hit on this pretty well. We have 2 parcels. We have a C3 parcel and a mobile home park parcel. The mobile home park parcel, we are not providing any improvements. That is going back to the site plan. That is effectively the preserve area. So it worked out pretty well that we ended up having around the same amount of preserve requirements as we did the area of the site of the mobile home park. We do have a meeting with FDOT later this week, and then another pre-application meeting with them mid-March to talk about their plans for improvements to 951. Based on what they've given us so far, they have no plans to construct it. They're looking at site acquisitions right now and funding in their 5-year plan to improve 951 on our side of the street. And what they're planning to do is to extend a park or sidewalk that currently ends where our point of ingress and egress here, to extend that down to Henderson Creek. So they're not widening the road. That's what we've been told. They're adding a sidewalk that, if you look at the aerial, you can see stops halfway in between or in the middle of our site. I don't think we have an aerial in here. Yeah, here we go. So it's hard to see, but you can see there's a sidewalk running along Collier Boulevard up to the point of the access, and then it does not extend. So that's what FDOT is planning to do, is to extend that all the way across Henderson Creek. This is to show, going back to the traffic patterns, the primary ingress or primary egress from our site naturally for folks getting onto Collier is going to be directly onto Collier Boulevard. And then you can also see the left turn lane leading on to Henderson is directed towards incoming traffic entering, who could also enter in onto Collier Boulevard, but as you can see, there's not a deceleration lane. So in that sense, I think folks are going to be more inclined, just practically speaking, to take advantage of the designated lane to left turn into Henderson. That's how we see it. We're meeting with traffic very shortly to kind of put more analysis behind that, where they have actual data that will come up with our final plan. Parking. Regarding parking, we have been working this site plan. We got a new site plan this morning. The last site plan that we presented, we were about 60 spaces below the parking code requirements. We've increased that. We're now at 262 spaces, which is 1.63 spaces per unit. That's about 17% below code requirements as it relates to the unit requirement plus the guest requirement plus the amenity space requirement. The amenity space programming is still in flux, so that number is going to change. However, this morning we did receive a new site plan with 276 parking spaces. That's been pretty well vetted. That still may change slightly as we get into comments and feedback from county staff, but that's about a 13% reduction. There's multiple ways parking reductions have been pursued in the county, and multiple ways that they're done, with with the new law, which is the Live Local Act. So there's a new House Bill 328, which is the follow-up to the Live Local Act. It's as they call it, the enhancement bill, call it a glitch bill. One of the things that they changed was they added in a very explicit provision that says that they encourage local governments to pursue parking reductions for affordable housing. Doesn't give a mandate. It does mandate a 20% reduction, preemptive parking reduction, administratively approved, similar to the administrative site plan approval, for developments that are within 1/2 mile of transportation hubs. This development is within 1/2 mile of a major bus stop at the Walmart. And so we have not pursued that with staff. That is something we would pursue in talking to them whether or not we actually meet the 20% preemptive parking reduction, but I did want to put that out there as this is new. This is a new preemptive provision under state statute. As you all know, you also have the administrative parking reduction option, and I want to share a few details on the parking reductions that the county has seen over the last few years. So since 2022 to 2024, there's been 87 administrative parking reductions applied for. The vast majority, 77 of those were approved. 7 are still under review and 2 have been withdrawn. Only 1 was denied. Here's a list of some communities that have recently gotten those reductions, and you can see there's some, 16.9%, almost 17% reductions. And those communities, I think it's important to note, were majority market rate units. They were not even affordable units. They may have had some affordable housing mixed into it, but they were not 100% workforce affordable housing, which naturally draws a lower demand for parking. And so in our operations, we own and operate these assets for the long term. The last thing we want to do is get calls from our residents, and it has happened before, where we get calls from our residents complaining that there's just not enough parking, and it makes operations a nightmare. And so given our experience, and you can see our portfolio here on the left, we typically target about 1.5 as our minimum for family development parking ratio. If you look at our portfolio, we're averaging 1.62, and this is across the country from Texas, Georgia, Florida, and Arizona. Our current developments that are under construction now average also, coincidentally, pure coincidence, 1.62 as well. Wasn't a target, but our target is really 1.5. We found that that is satisfactory to serve our tenants, to serve their guests, to serve the amenities. So operationally, that's where we always strive to be. We can put some data behind that as we would with an administrative parking reduction. We typically do parking counts at the highest point of parking throughout the day, see how many cars are in the parking lot. There's a lot of things that we've done to be able to justify that if we go that route. But that is one of the rubs here. We are slightly underparked, and there's a few ways we can solve it through the administrative parking reduction, through the preemption under state statute. We've also talked about splitting up or reducing the preserve. I don't know if that's a variance that you've seen come across the dais too often, but that is an option. If you could reduce the preserve, we obviously open up more surface area to achieve parking. And stormwater management, I'm just going to hit a few high points. I'm going to let Ryan come up and speak at a much more technically proficient level. This project, as I stated previously, we have a lot of eyes on us. We have a lot of hooks in us. We have a lot of jurisdiction regulation that we have to comply with. Collier County's code, SWIFT-MUD, ERP, Department of Environmental Protection, Florida DEP, all of that, especially, very much a different requirement and a level of scrutiny and a level of design requirements than it was just 5 to 10 years ago as well. And so environmental protections are very highly scrutinized and would be on this project nonetheless. Some of the site characteristics that we've talked about, engineering methods that are proven, we're using them. There's a lot of sites that are in similar or worse conditions throughout the county that are developed regularly right now. Numerous waterways in Collier County are considered to be impaired waterways. Henderson Creek is considered to be an impaired waterway, and I think that had something to do with the nutrient levels in there, where there was contaminants that were found, and I think after Hurricane Ian that was more pronounced because a lot of those houses on there are on septic, and as the water table rose, a lot of them got washed into Henderson Creek. Our development does not use a septic system. We use a pretty highly engineered control and engineering method that requires catch basins that have filters that filter out the oils, trash, hydrocarbons, go into a vault where they're retained and treated. They sit in the vault until they're treated, and they're discharged into the preserve and into Henderson Creek at the level that we're permitted to because it is an impaired waterway. So that's kind of the general, that's as far as I go on the understanding of it. Ryan will speak a little more eloquently on that. So Ryan, please. Thanks.
Hello, Ryan White with Davidson Engineering. Did a good job talking with the stormwater. We are proposing the catch basin inserts. The filter, it's a treatment train process that most all projects have to go through these days to meet South Florida standards, and that includes the nutrient removal. And currently, it's a pre-post design they'll make us do. We analyze the existing site, determine what the existing runoff is per the accepted runoff rates and loading rates for that type of use that's currently there. And then we'll propose a system that will treat the stormwater and provide the removal rate in the post condition to be less than it is in the existing condition. This is going to involve using catch basin inserts or a filter on the catch basins that initially collect the runoff, the trash, the hydrocarbons, oils running off there to reduce that. And it'll enter the stormwater vaults. And the first, it'll be considered dry retention, and it'll meet the standards of the Harvey Harper report or the nutrient analysis that we'll do to determine how much removal we'll need for that. And then that water quality will be set higher typically than what is normally required for the previous system, the 1 inch or 2.5 times percent impervious. So the nutrient removal is a higher water quality requirement than the normal for like suspended solids. So from there, once water quality is fully achieved, and we're going to be providing 150% of the water quality requirement because of the impaired waters that we'll be discharging to. But once full water quality is achieved, then we'll utilize the preserve area or any other area on the site too for open air stage storage to help attenuate the 25-year storm event. And then from there, we'll control the discharge to Henderson Creek based on the updated discharge rates for the county. And then this one happens to be in the Belmead South area, which has the 0.04 CFS per acre discharge rate, which is the lowest in the county. So we'll be utilizing their model to mimic that discharge rate.
Do you want to say anything on the traffic or next steps?
Oh yeah, the traffic's the next steps. We're setting up a methodology meeting with Collier County, which is required for all site development plans. And we'll also be coordinating with the right-of-way department along with the FDOT too for the access points and traffic distribution and any potential right-of-way or sidewalks. We don't have any of the vault laid out yet, but the vaults are going to be under majority of the parking lot area as well. We're just try to utilize the site as much as possible. This is typical with a lot of sites we've been seeing now with limited space and the cost of land going up, that the vaults are an option now that everyone's been looking at. No.
How safe the vaults are compared to
Yeah, we'll have their accepted practice. We'll look at several different products to see what the most economical to make it sure that it's affordable. We've been using them on multiple projects now throughout the county, and they've been working fine as far as we've seen. They will help treat all the water underground. You won't really notice it, but it'll infiltrate in the ground. Those inspection points are all there. It'll be maintained properly to maintain the volume in the system.
Thanks, Ryan. Much better explanation than I could have given. I just have a couple more slides, and I would look forward to hearing some feedback. So we do have met a couple of our neighbors already, so it was nice to see some faces of folks that are concerned, and their concerns are perfectly understandable. But if you're not in the development space, it may not be clear the amount of regulation, design controls, engineering controls that we actually employ on these projects. So I hope this presentation has cleared up a few of their questions, but we still nonetheless will have a neighborhood information meeting. Commit to that in the next 30 to 45 days. What we're really waiting for is just to get our site plan ironed out to a point that it's presentable, and we're pretty much there. So that is our next step. Just wanted to make that clear. And then I'll leave you with just a picture of what this product will ultimately, be built to the level of. I mean, this is maybe not the exact same look and design, but I think the county, who we're partnered with on a similar basis under a land lease, this is the level of product that we're going to achieve. So appreciate the opportunity to come back so quickly. Like I said, we still moving at a good clip here, and we want to keep this progress going. In moving to the negotiation of the development agreement, this is not moving to the county cutting a check in any form for the acquisition of the land at this point. Thank you.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yes. First of all, I want to say thank you. Commissioner Saunders described this when I asked for this reconsideration as a fire drill, and you have been stepping and fetching to be able to meet my requests. I want to say, I do want to hear from staff with regard to your rendition of the stormwater quality quantity. I also want to have at some particular stage a discussion with you after we've talked to staff about the parking, about the ingress and egress. I saw a deficit for stacking at the actual entrance on 951 Collier Boulevard as a potential for a block. That's just even though it's a two-lane road, it's a two-lane road, and if 6 people decide to go in there at the same time, and we end up with stacking coming out onto the southbound 951. And then as far as parking goes, let's explore the discussion of impervious parking over in some of the preserve area that's over there. That may be a methodology for us to get, and we're going to have a discussion under commissioner comments with regard to the lack of necessary, in my opinion, necessary parking requisites that are currently within the LDC, even though this development's coming in at a deficit. I think we have deficits built into the LDC. So I'd like to have that discussion at some point in time before we cut you loose.
Excuse me. For the record, Pat McDowell, I can speak to our historical parking experience because I have bought and operated other properties that were shown on the page there. And so I had my staff go back, and I wasn't sure what the answer was going to be. I had them go back and take a look at the workforce housing that we had bought over the years and put together that chart. And we came up with 28 properties, 7,000 units, and our average was 1.62. And the unit mix is extremely similar to the unit mix we're going to have at the project that we're proposing here. So I'll just say that I'm comfortable. We don't meet the requirements. We don't meet what the code is. But my experience is that we have plenty of parking scheduled for this property to handle the unit mix that we have and the tenancy that we have, given historical experience that we have.
Do you have any other than Bainbridge that we and I mean no disrespect. I hope I've said this to you before, and I'm going to say it again because the cameras are running. I'm not your enemy. Do you have another community other than in Collier County where the average median income is 107,000 plus? 80% of 107,000 is a 2-car household for a 1-bedroom apartment.
Yeah, in Collier County, I don't.
Yeah, and that's where I take exception to the standard rule of 1.6 working. With all due respect, it may work in other areas that have AMIs that are more realistic as a
well. We could,
word
we
comes to my head. I'm not debating. I'm just talking out loud.
Some of them are in Austin and some places like that are not cheap areas to live in, but not Collier County. Point well taken. Thank you.
That's my point, sir. Our AMI is exceptionally high across the country, and you're dealing with, even at 30%, you're still dealing with a $32,000 a year annual income for the one-bedroom apartments, and all the way up to, and at some point, I think I heard Chris say you shift over to 80%, and I don't think our AMI is going to go down. That's where I'd like to appropriate as much parking as possible and explore. That's why I suggested the impervious parking over in the preserve area, if we can get there.
You want Ms. Cook to answer your stormwater questions?
Please.
Step right up there, Ms. Cook.
Good afternoon, Jamie Cook, your Director of Development Review. Commissioner, I'm not really sure where your question's going, but as Ryan did say, we do have a number of size-constrained sites that are doing stormwater vaulting now. It is not prohibited within our code. They will be having to go through both review by Collier County as well as the Water Management District to ensure that they are adequately maintaining and treating their stormwater on the site. Some examples of some recent projects that we've done stormwater vaulting on are One Naples, Aspire, Blue Coral Apartments, Porsche has done it, several, the Gulf Shore Playhouse, which is being developed in the industrial park, among some others. And I do have a map showing them around the county if you'd like to see them.
No, you telling me that is just fine.
Yes.
One of the reasons why we're here today is to revisit these items that I don't think were as well explained in the first go-round. The second point, that when you and I met in my office, were you able to get any baseline data on Henderson Creek as of now?
There is none that currently exists. The monitoring that is done actually in Rookery Bay. So there is none in this location currently.
So what I would like to see soon is baseline data from the bridge that goes under 951, the bridge where the creek goes under 951. And notice I called it a creek this time, right? Because that's where the discharge is going to be. And then go up the creek, upstream, to monitor what's going on, because we have a condominium project next door. We have a mobile home park across the street on the south side of the creek. And there's a lot of affluents hitting the waterway. We already know it's an impaired waterway, so baseline data is imperative to ensure that the water quality that's imposed upon a developer is sufficient.
Understood. And we will work with the applicant and our pollution control team to develop that study and get some monitoring data for you.
Please.
Yep.
Prior to them breaking ground.
Absolutely.
Mr. LaCastro.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll have more questions when we hear from the citizens, but just a couple things I wrote down here. So Chris, from 2 weeks ago, same amount of units, same height. You didn't change any of that, or did I miss something?
Same.
Same.
Just to your point, Commissioner, one of the reasons we are static on the number of units and the height, we do have an application in with the state that's now been approved. And so that application contemplated what we had proposed, which was verified under the Live Local zoning interpretation we received. And as it relates to parking, I would have no problem dropping the height of the building, but what that does is it limits my surface area because I'm having to put those units on the grade now, probably taking up another 60 feet in line on the building. To accomplish that, I would lose surface area for parking.
That's if you kept the units the same amount. Yeah, then you'd have to spread out more. But as you're saying here, you can't change the number of units because your application's already in. And right?
We would lose that funding.
Absolutely. Okay. I like that you moved the preserve. My question is the preserve all vegetation, or is there some sort of water retention on there? I understand the vault system, and Jamie explained it perfectly. A lot of people use it. But does any of that water then get retained in the preserve area? It's all vegetation.
Again, Ryan White, Davidson Engineering. Yeah, the vaults would be handling all the water quality, and then as the water level rises, it would be conveyed over into the preserve area for water management to allow it to help attenuate. It's clean water going over to the preserve, and that would help attenuate the 25-year storm event.
So it makes the preserve area more of wetlands then when that happens, right?
Well, it's uplands now, but uplands are these type of soils, and our area here are used to being inundated with water.
My only concern with that
and they would only be temporarily inundated just during the larger storm events.
My only concern with that is, and there's workaround, there's still some things, is sometimes it can draw a lot of mosquitoes. You know, now you've dumped a lot of water into that, and we have areas where it happens naturally. You know, people all complain about the mosquitoes, and they just have a bunch of vegetation behind them. It's not something artificially, you know, part of a construction project. It's just undeveloped land. But then we're ringing the bat phone to the mosquito control folks because that area is just inundated. So when you dump water into an area that's preserve, it sometimes can create other kinds of issues.
And we will be following the preserve standards. And then when you do water management in a preserve, there is some extra requirements you have to put on the site plan to monitor the vegetation to make sure you're not changing the habitat, that it still survives.
That'll be something we'd have to, and we haven't approved anything, but you know, that puts it close to Henderson Creek. So if you had excessive amount of maybe a mosquito problem, and it can be dealt with, we just have to monitor it. But that was, you answered my question, which was there would be water that would eventually go into the preserve, making it sort of like
I'm just leaving that as an option now to limit the vault cost so that we can use parts of this site for open air storage.
Okay. And then, I mean, I'll wait to hear from others, but you know, when you have an affordable housing project like this that's full of workforce people, which is, and it's not 100%, there'll be people living here, like you said, veterans, retirees, but there'll be a big chunk of folks that get up in the morning, go to work, and then come home and you know, exit and enter at the same time. Gosh, just one entry and exit point on Collier Boulevard being the main one. I mean, I can just see, you know, a lot of the workforce kind of go to work in that one, you know, window of time. I can see a big stack up there, and then coming home, you know, a similar thing. I'm not saying I know what the approved solution is. I mean, you could move another entry and exit point, you know, further down in the parking lot area, but that still may not help anything. You know, I mean, it's not, this isn't that big of a site where you can put another entry and egress point like on the other side or something like that. But that just jumped out. I mean, I love the changes that you made. And I can tell you one of the smartest guys in the room that I'm sure we're going to hear from is Rick Alberti. Alberti, right, sir? So he was in my office yesterday, maybe in all of our offices, and he represents the community very well, very professionally, I might add. Sometimes, you know, you get citizens that come into your office banging on tables. We just want it to be a park, you know, and it's like, okay, well, we're trying to solve an issue here. But those were just sort of the short-term answers I had, and I don't know what the answer is on the you know, you do traffic counts, and then you say, hey, if 80% of the people all leave between 7 and 8 a.m., they're all pulling out of that one exit point onto Collier Boulevard. Collier Boulevard's already swamped, you know, at that time in the morning. You know, I don't know that there's a better solution, so it's not like I have a better design, but I just maybe you do, or maybe there was an alternative, or there was something else.
We very well could end up having to put in deceleration lanes. To make the left in going towards Marco, making the left into the property, and then certainly from Marco going to 41, they're probably going to require a deceleration.
I like, and you mentioned it. I like everything you've done to keep the cars away from Henderson Creek. You know, we're not trying to over-inundate that road, but you know, Collier is also a road that's pretty full. And you know, this one complex having all the cars sort of come in and out on just that one spot. But we'll talk a little more about it.
You have a Walmart that, you know, is just down the road where there is significant traffic going in and out.
Yeah, but they have a light there.
But they do have a light.
See, that's the thing. They have a light.
That may be
my thought.
That may be an option.
But then you guys will scream for a light, and I can tell you, I mean, you know, we can't put a light at every intersection, and so an FDOT approves the light. Said never put a light there. It's too close to other lights, so that's why this has to be solved naturally. The light helps obviously at Walmart and at some of the other major intersections, but that stretch is already light heavy. And so a light wouldn't be approved, would be my guess, you know, for a complex like this. But I really commend you for, like you say, Commissioner McDaniel said it perfectly, you know, you put on your fireman's hat, and I like the changes, but I like it a lot more if I hear from the citizens who have really spent a lot of time, Rick really leading the charge here, to see what they think. This is also a perfect example, you know, just going back a little bit ago. Yeah, it's in my district, but look at all the commissioners here. Look how involved they are. You know, nothing gets past us. Maybe I know a little bit more about some of the heartburn of some folks in District 1 because maybe, you know, I'm the only one that has town hall meetings in District 1. But you can see everybody up here cares about affordable housing, asking tough questions. You know, nothing's getting past us for those that are sort of watching. You know, what did you say, Commissioner Hall? None of us wake up in the morning trying to do a bad thing for Collier County. But I like the changes. I like the move of the preserve. Some of the other changes that you made, I'm sure that was after talking to citizens and maybe even a couple of the commissioners. I'm not sure we're 100% there yet. We'll see what the citizens have to say, but you answered my initial questions. Thanks, Chris.
You bet.
Commissioner McDaniel, back at you, sir.
Yeah, I forgot. You took so long, I forgot what I was going to ask.
Well, it's my district.
Well, I guess the point is, do we want to bring Trinity up now and ask about the traffic with regard to the stacking and such? How is there a methodology? Do you want to bring them?
Either that or citizen comments. Maybe we might
Let's
hear.
get staff out of the way and then do.
I wanted to ask Chris a question because he made a comment about the traffic.
Okay, Trinity's coming, and we'll get her after you. Go ahead.
If you don't mind.
I don't mind.
Chris, in your presentation, you made the statement that the majority of traffic would go to 41. What makes you think that if Marco has a need for people to work on the island in a lot of their businesses, and this being a midpoint where, we have systems in Marco, we actually have CAT buses that run in special hours just to get these people off the island and sit on that bus for an hour and a half to go.
Pure speculation.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So,
I know there's more businesses and commercial going towards 41, but you're absolutely right. This development will probably appeal to some of the folks who work on Marco but cannot afford to live on the island. So that's a great point. So.
Yeah, so I just want to, we'll learn a little bit more about the traffic and how we're going to have our egress lanes and stuff. But I think that's something we need to look at because you surely don't want to make a right and have to do a U-turn on Collier to go south. So, thank you.
Yeah, and I think that the good part is we have a full median cut there already.
Okay.
And so that can be solved. We don't have to go and apply for an FDOT to get a median cut. That is a longer process and often isn't approved. So we're on the right track there already. You make a great point. I appreciate that.
Thanks.
Well, that's my question with regard to traffic. What kind of analysis is in fact done? How do we estimate from a population? You move Trinity's behind you. So
Trinity can do it in 21 seconds.
yes, or less.
For the record, Trinity Scott, Transportation Management Services Department Head. This applicant will be required to do a traffic impact statement when they come in. They will look at distribution. They will hire a professional traffic engineer who is going to look at distributions within that area. Looking at the area, there's probably going to be a pretty decent split that is going to wind up in Marco Island. That is a large movement for us, but not saying that they're not going to go north. This is really a pivotal place for us to be able to have some attainable housing for folks. But what I will tell you about the traffic is Collier County will not be making the decision with regard to what happens on Collier Boulevard. That is a state facility. The Florida Department of Transportation will weigh in on that. We'll be the ones who require what deceleration lanes are going to be there and what they don't allow. Furthermore, this section of roadway previously was in the work program, FDOT's work program for widening in fiscal year 28. It has been pushed out to fiscal year 29, which would widen this section of roadway to 6 lanes. So you would see a median through the roadway. It'll probably look very similar to the section that's north. So I'm trying to pull up the plans right now, but I'm on Wi-Fi, so my computer keeps shutting down and not allowing me to open them up to see what this section looks like. But certainly when FDOT developed those plans, this wasn't taken into consideration. So things may have to be modified, but they will not only be talking to Collier County on the stormwater and through the site development plan process, we will coordinate with the Florida Department of Transportation, as will they.
And will we have any input into the DOT with regard to the ingress and egress, as far as turning lanes, acceleration lanes, decel lanes, and such?
Typically, we do not. Typically, FDOT is the authority. My guess is they're going to have a deceleration lane. FDOT is going to look really hard at that median opening that exists today because it doesn't look like it has a turn lane. Presuming they're going to have to put a turn lane in, depending on how close that is to Henderson Creek or Henderson Creek Drive. That may be a deciding factor, but all of those things, they'll look at the traffic impacts, how much traffic they expect to have with the development, and FDOT will make the decisions accordingly.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I guess my question is, do we need to revote for the surtax money going forward for the project, or just add this discussion as record?
No, you need a new motion. This was a reconsideration.
We have public comment,
Yeah, we got comments.
Oh, we got public comment?
and I'm not done yet.
Yes, sir. I have 13 registered speakers for this item. I'll remind the speakers again to use both podiums. Jackie Kay will be followed by Jessica Turner. All right. Then Jackie will be followed by Robert Williams.
She go there.
Thank you. So good afternoon, Jackie Kay. I am an Army veteran and I live here in Collier County. I'm the Veteran Outreach Team Director for the Journey Home. We are dealing with many veterans in our community who are not only homeless, living on the streets, living in parking lots, whether they're living in storage sheds. I have a veteran who pretty much lost his home and couldn't afford to find a place to live. I did write an email, certainly out of frustration, because I know that there are apartments that have came up or are coming up, and veterans are told, or I'm being told, that veterans cannot have these apartments or cannot apply for them because they're not on the essential service personnel list. So out of frustration, I did write an email. I went up to Tallahassee and I provided an email for the commissioners. And the way I look at it, if veterans, if we're essential enough to fight for our country and die for our country, we should be essential enough to get housing. Now, based on the statutes, I included that in the letter from Senator Wright. It does clearly provide the language for veterans to get these housing. So I would like to request that veterans in Collier County are put on that list, and local authority as well as the housing program can make that determination. So whatever needs to be done to get that veterans or military members put on the list, I would love to see that. What I have is a diagram. For our organization, our focus is on building that bridge. The words are very small. So what we have is veterans are falling between that gap, and we're working with not only EMS, looking at adding the hospitals as well as the jails, veteran court, putting together a collaboration of partners to work together to ensure that veterans have not only the housing, but also all of the services that they need. I'm working closely with Commissioner Saunders on that, but I would absolutely love all of the commissioners' support on ensuring that we get veterans not only on that priority list, but also to help us to create a system of serving veterans. Next chart, please. So on that chart, you'll notice that spike. That is the point at which a veteran goes into crisis, whether they're homeless or whether it's issues related to mental health. And up to that crisis point, that's about a 1-year period. But you'll notice after the crisis point, the stressors or whatever the issue is still high, so that leads them into the next crisis. So our organization, we're focused on putting our system before the crisis to divert that crisis. So again, thank you all very much. And whatever the staff has to do or whatever you all have to do, I would love feedback on that, please. Thank you.
Your next speaker is Robert Williams. He'll be followed by Rick Alberte. I hope I'm saying that right. Mr. Williams was seated 3 additional minutes from Lynn Thai. She's out there, so he'll have a total of 6 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Bobby Williams. Mr. Rick LaCosta, you're my new commissioner. I moved to your district.
Our district.
Our district, thank you. Thank you, Bill McDaniels, for my previous serving me in my old district.
Oh, you'll be much better in District 1.
I hope so. And your distinguished commissioners, thank you very much for your service. My concern is this area. See, I was born here. My father's the youngest of 15. My grandfather was Barefoot Williams. at the end of Barefoot Williams Road where the Oyster House was on Henderson Creek. Now, if you've been here long enough, you've seen a lot of development. I know I have. And you've seen what it can do to our environments. This development proposed here on Henderson Creek, it should sum it up right here in the newspaper last week. The EPA, the state of Florida, the permitting issues over to the state, not over to the state. Some of them that says was several years of improperly reviewed. This is just some of the stuff. They go on to talk about our manatees being left out in the cold. Very environmentally sensitive in this newspaper. And the very next page is this housing deal to get a second look. Thanks again. With our Live Local tax dollars on 180 unit development on a very sensitive creek, not a river, or it is a creek that feeds our estuary, Rookery Bay, Conservancy, and a lot of filtrations for our waterways. This development, 180 units in that small area, cars are the big issue to me. You're talking about vaults and storm drain runoff, commercial size, whatever. And then you talk about reducing the cost of it to something inexpensive so you can make this happen. Well, okay, you want to get cheap stuff now. I'm thinking, what I'm hearing, sorry to make this not very professional, but then I hear of the reserve. Okay, now I'm hearing they want to use some of the reserve for parking, which holds more oils and pesticides and what have you, runoff. Then I hear they're going to have a runoff into the creek as long as the water has been treated or what have you with your machines and things. But we all know we're in a coastal hazard area. This place floods more than once a year, twice a year, once a month, many times every week. That runoff isn't going to be held or contained. It's going to run right into the creek. So that doesn't hold too much water with the systems that are being used. I don't know what kind of surveys or the things that you go to get that approved. I know that there are other questions that other people have. I got a list. I went to a little yard sale 2 days ago. I was there a half an hour. These are people who live in that little neighborhood who are concerned, just that half an hour of signatures. The land development code requirements as well, you need that of the state also, as I guess I hear. And the medium car allowed, you're figuring 1.5 cars per unit, you're calculating. I don't see that also happening. We all know it takes 2 to live. And just to get back with you, I think it should be reconsidered with the Live Local tax dollars we're using. I know there are other lands out there that can be used for the same development. I am pro-development, but I'm also want to make sure our environment is kept. I've seen it go away with development. And we've made a lot of mistakes in the past with decisions that we've done in developing. And I appreciate your comments on common sense on things other than the law or the rules, because some things deserve common sense, not just calculations, especially like environmental sensitive areas like this, which affects all of us actually in the whole county, because this is a way of life that, you know, we don't want to lose. Before you know it, it'll look like Vietnam or something. I've seen all those waterways. So I'm just a very concerned citizen that would like to have more surveys or, like you said, testing on certain areas and waterways. And again, I don't like the idea of inexpensive machineries and filters and vaults. And I don't like the idea of discharging any kind of water into the creek. You already acknowledge it's very sensitive creek. So we should know better. Thank you.
Your next speaker is Rick Alberti. He will be followed by Terry Dignan. Rick has been seated additional time from Mike Dude and from Tina Cox. So he will have 9 minutes.
Thank you, sir.
Are we burning his 9 minutes while he's passing stuff out?
We are not, sir.
I want to go to work in shorts. That's what I want to.
Common practice is to wait till they state their name.
Start talking without stating my name?
Well, no, I'll get you.
Hi, I'm Rick Alberti. Pleasure to meet everyone here. Before I get started, just a couple things I want to bounce off. I have more questions probably than issues, but I have quite a few of both. A couple of questions I had in regards to the 75-foot building. My understanding was that the buildings that were created had to be within 1 mile, had to be the same height or not higher than any other buildings within that area for 1 mile. When I saw in the paper what it said, what it compared it to Fiddler's Creek, which is more like 5 miles away. So I wasn't sure if that's what you were looking at when you were comparing. Didn't it need to be 1 mile distance?
Quick, this isn't question and answer
Oh, I'm
time.
sorry.
They'll come back. They'll come back.
They'll come back and you ask your questions, then they'll come back and answer those.
Okay. It was just something that came up. What I'd like to start with was the paper that I handed out to you. And this was from your Housing Policy Development Group. And this was their recommendation. And I was just had to wonder why their application ID did not receive sufficient score to secure recommendation. But still, we followed through and decided to go with this company. Is that?
Not,
I'm sorry.
Keep going.
Okay.
Well, you have 9 minutes.
All right, all right. The other question I had was, my understanding of reading the paper now that the state has given the feds all the change for permits. I wondered if that had any in regards to this project, if there's any, if they have to resubmit their permits to the feds for that. And we do have to say one thing. When we put a petition out, everyone signed at our park, and this was a one-time, everybody in the park agreed on something, is that we found this not be a good thing in our side. My next page that I've handed out to you was in regards to wildlife and wetlands. And again, this was from one of the documents that were in your agenda sheet for everything's on this project, and these were things that needed to be touched on. The number 7 was from the Conservancy of Southwest Florida, and they had concerns about the animals and the wildlife also. I was wondering if a permit needed to be from them on that also. Again, I've got a lot of questions. The other issue that I had with the new project is the height level of the pavement. What we've had from a different project that was put in alongside us, they raised their height so their rainwater all comes down to our park, and our ditches end up flooding periodically. And the ditches out by Collier are completely flooded too. Then the next one, to move a little along here, is a 2-page thing. One is a picture of Collier, so you have a better understanding of what we're looking at here. And I don't know if anybody else has come across the bridge from Marco, like Rick Castro does. He sees it every day. So when you're coming over that bridge from Marco, you're on a 2-lane bridge. and they're doing 50, 60 miles an hour. They're already coming across there. So the only options that we have right now coming off of Henderson is we have to turn to the right, we have to go down to Walmart, and if we want to go to Marco, go the other way. We at least have people coming from Marco. They can come in, and you'll see on the green line, that is kind of our little runoff ramp so they can get onto Henderson. What we would see with the new project is they'd have to increase that. So if they're coming from Marco and pulling off into their lot, we won't know. They're not going to have a turn signal on, so we don't know that we can actually take off because that car is coming in. And then if they're coming out of that lot, if you're coming over, they're going to try to get out of their parking space while the people are coming over on northbound Collier. It's an accident waiting to happen. Then the other question I had in regards to your crossover from Tower Road here, that is a two-car limit. That's not a section that you can sit there and have cars waiting. They already have issues there every day, people trying to get on and off. And again, one more thing on that. If you're looking at when you are coming out of our road, I'm sorry, Henderson Creek Road, if you're looking to the left to see what's coming, you cannot see the cars until they're over top of the bridge. The bridge actually hides the cars to an effect. So you've got about 900 feet to make a decision, and at 60 miles an hour, it doesn't give you a lot of time. So it's either way, either you're coming southbound and you're making a quick cutover, or you're trying to get off Henderson Creek to get on Collier northbound. While you're doing all that, you're also watching for walkers, bikers, periodic people just walking by both ways. And what also increases is that we've got Walmart at the north end, so you've got a lot of people coming all the way from Manatee. They walk over the bridge and are walking along the sidewalk. So you've got a constant trek of people. If you could stop that, that would be great, but it's not going to stop. And then go down to the last page. As you walk through these, the first question I have is the height of the workforce project, and comparing it to Fiddler's Creek, which is 5 miles away. The other one was we got to the spreadsheet from the traffic department, and if you look at from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m., the average time from January to March is 1 car every 2 seconds. Okay. So if you think about that, that's pretty good for a 2-lane road. It's continuous, never stopping. The only time you get breaks are when you get the light at Manatee, which is south of there. But the other problem there is Manatee has you can right turn on red. So you've got all the condos and all the other people coming down Manatee. As soon as they get a spot, they fill that road right up, exactly. So it's a continuous traffic. And then what happens when you're coming on southbound Collier to turn in, you're looking not only at the cars coming over the road, anybody that's coming off of Tower Road, but then also as you're cutting in, you're looking, because it's a very narrow road, is the people walking. You got people walking, and once they walk in, they may be walking on the side of the road, so you're very limited on size. So you can't really speed up too much of the worry of trying to hit someone. And our park is about 310 units, and we're probably maybe a third, maybe a little bit more of the total number of people. So it's a continuous traffic flow coming through there of people walking and the cars coming through. Let's see here. Yeah, and then also once this project is in there, I can't imagine the amount of walking traffic going to Walmart. It's going to be so easy for them, just like it is for us. It's just down the street. And the fact if you had 1.5 cars per unit, you're talking almost 250 more additional cars coming through there. I see nothing but hard problems, accidents, and fatalities. I don't see how you can get around it. I wish they could. They have a beautiful building. I would love to see it. I wish they would change it over to maybe some high-end condos of some type. But then also, as you see their parking lot goes out into Henderson Road also, if they're pulling out of there and you got people coming into Henderson from the southbound, you have the chance of if somebody's going slow or they hold it up, so you could be backed up outside of the Henderson right onto Collier. I could easily see that where cars are going slow or stopping because they're turning or waiting for somebody else to turn. It's too small of an area for very many cars to get any mobility to get around. Bear with me. Well, the other question too, in regards to that first letter, this was a coastal high hazardous area. And I'm surprised that we would allow building in a section like that. Thank you.
Your next speaker is Terry Dignam, and he will be followed by Elizabeth Ratty. Terry's been seated additional time from Bridget Cook. Could you raise your hand, Bridget?
He's out in the hall.
And Steve Cook? Steve Cook? Yeah, well, hi. You will have a total of 9 minutes and be followed by Elizabeth Ratty.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. My name is Terry Dignan. I'm the president at the Condo Association, Henderson Creek Village, directly next door to this project. And actually, Mr. Alberti's brought up a lot of the things that I wanted to address. And I'm going to hit the number one thing first. In talking about I understand that the reason they were permitted to go 75 feet up was because it was under the Live Local Act, which provides that they're allowed to go as high as anything within 1 mile. I did some calculations the other day and got a Google map out and located the entire Fiddler's Creek program. It looks to me like that, and it goes way back in there, all the way up to 41. But it looks to me, at least by my calculation, I may be wrong, but I think I'm right. It looks like the shortest distance between this particular property and Fiddler's Creek, which would be at the way at the north end, off Roost Road, if you're familiar with it. It's a little dead-end road, is about 6,500 feet, which is well over a mile. And so I don't know who came up with this one mile within 1 mile calculation, but that's my calculation. I presume somebody from the county would cross-check that.
It's either built or zoned. So you can't just look around for a 75-foot tall building. The property across the street's 75 foot high, zoned.
Yeah.
It's either zoned or built.
Yeah.
That's the answer.
This isn't zoned.
Two of you have asked the question.
So it doesn't apply, or I mean,
It totally applies.
yeah,
It's
so
e-
they have to be within 1 mile, or they can't use the.
Okay, and maybe we'll wait for further explanation until we're done. I thought you understood, but it is either built or zoned in the
Yeah, I
property.
understand it, but I don't
The
think.
property across the street's zoned for 75 foot high. It's not that, but they have a zoning to do that.
Even if it's lower.
Oh, so you're talking about there's another building, not Fiddler's Creek? I was told that they were using.
Correct, the gas station across the street.
Zoned for 75 feet.
It's zoned for 75 foot height, and that gives them that right. And forgive me, sorry, Mr.
Thank
Chair,
you
I
for
broke my
correcting
own
me.
rule.
But in any event, you know, I will second exactly what Mr. Alberti said. That Tower Road is a difficult place to get across the street. I ride my bike a lot, and trying to get across to Tower Road at that intersection is very difficult. The cars are coming fast, both directions. It's a lot of cars, and I'm afraid that's going to be a big problem. They did address, one of our concerns was they wanted to raise the elevation on their property. I didn't hear anything mentioned about that, but apparently they've changed the buffer because we were worried about the water draining onto our property. And but I think that the automobile situation is going to be difficult. People are going to be trying to get out to go to work. People that want to go to Marco, they're going to, everybody's going to be trying to come out. People are going to start coming out the exit only or the entrance only ramp so they can get on the road, and it's going to be a mess. And that's all I have to say. And thank you very much.
Your next speaker is Elizabeth Ratty, and she will be followed by Doug Williams.
Good afternoon again. Elizabeth Rady. I am speaking on behalf of the Collier County Tenants Union and the tenants in Collier County future workforce housing. About a month ago, I received a phone call from a reporter asking me for my opinion. The reporter asked me what I thought of the first ever Collier County surtax project for workforce housing by McDowell. I stated I was excited and I knew this developer, but it was just a drop in the giant bucket compared to the need we currently have for obtainable housing that is remotely affordable. In my discussion with this reporter, I spoke about the heart behind this development team that I have witnessed in their genuine passion to help make this a reality. I, for the first time in a long time, could see hope for the tenants in Collier County, and it's because McDowell chose to be part of the solution and not the problem. It's been a while since I've been here to these meetings, but that doesn't mean I haven't been involved in the fight for affordable housing. I've just concentrated my efforts differently. Timing was mentioned at the first meeting, and I want to speak about that. I'm a disaster case manager for a nonprofit organization, and that is contracted through FEMA to help transition clients out of FEMA housing into permanent living conditions. The problem that 100% of the organizations are having is it's an impossible feat to find affordable housing for those survivors, many of which fall in the lower scale of the AMI. It's hard enough before Hurricane Ian, and you all know that. When I learned that McDowell was getting ready to finish an affordable workforce and 2 affordable senior housing communities, we saw hope for the first time for our community. FEMA is getting ready to pull out of our community real soon. And without McDowell's projects getting ready to open, many of those people would not have the housing that they need, and they will be homeless. I have to tell you, working and helping rebuild trailers that can't get insurance, most of these people are trailer living individuals that will wish that they had McDowell affordable housing because their SSI checks, their disability, their retirement will not cover repairing or replacing one of those homes when that hurricane destroys it again, because the insurance won't cover it. And you will wish, like all these people stuck on this FEMA housing that are fixing to go homeless, that they had a McDowell apartment to live in. Thank you.
Your next speaker is Doug Williams, and he will be followed by Monique Atkinson.
Hello, how everybody's doing? My name is Doug Williams. I'm a current resident at the Santa Barbara Echoes Apartments in Naples. The new affordable housing initiative has helped me a lot in my life as a single father. The apartments surpass expectations with its modern and its comfortable design. I'm grateful for the chance as it has provided a home for me and my daughter. Previously, I had to rely on friends and places to stay due to financial issues, relationship, things like that. I said, and the thing is, despite even having a steady job, working hard, whatever you do, it's very, like everyone is saying, it's very difficult. We all know that. I mean, I've been here for 20 years in Naples, and it's just been, it's just hard to find a place to stay here. I see it every day. I see homeless people all over the street. I don't want to be that. I'm grateful for the opportunity to even be where I'm at right now. It means a lot to me and my daughter. So I'm grateful for what they're doing. And I understand that there's a lot of community concerns and things like that, and I understand that, but we got to remember, we're people, and no one who wants to live on the street, and who doesn't want to be able to live in a comfortable environment where you can raise your family and be, a part of society, right? That's what we want, and we all want that. That's it. Thank you.
Your next speaker is Monique Atkinson or Antonio Garcia.
I will be speaking on behalf of my mother. She didn't bring her glasses, so I prepared their speech for her. I'm here to bring attention to the pressing issue of affordable housing in Collier County. specifically addressing the struggles that many, including myself, have faced in securing suitable living arrangements. As a mother striving to provide a stable home for my son, I have encountered numerous challenges while searching for suitable housing in the area. Several apartment complexes have denied my application, citing the requirement for an income 4 to 5 times the rent. The stringent criterion has proven to be a significant barrier for individuals like me. I'm immensely grateful for the existence of Echoes Apartments, a community that recognizes the diverse needs of its residents. The inclusive approach and the acceptance have the inclusive approach and the acceptance have alleviated the burden from families like mine, offering a chance for a better life. However, such communities are scarce, leaving Such communities are scarce, leaving many hardworking individuals forced to work multiple jobs just to make ends meet, often residing in unsafe neighborhoods due to limited affordable housing options. Collier County should prioritize the development of more communities like Echoes Apartments. This not only addresses the immediate need for accessible housing, but also contributes to the well-being of families striving to build a secure future. Everyone in our community should have the opportunity to live in a safe, supportive environment without being burdened by excessive income requirements. By expanding the availability of affordable housing, we empower families to escape the cycle of poverty and create a positive ripple effect within our community. I urge you to consider the struggles faced by many residents and champion the development of additional communities like Echo Apartments to ensure that Collier County becomes a place where every family could thrive. There are hardworking families working 2 to 3 jobs to make ends meet, and they live in bad neighborhoods. I think it's important that everyone should have this opportunity. Thank you.
Monique Atkinson, we'll try one more time. I checked, she's not in the hallway, unless she's disguised herself as Crystal Kinsel. And that was all of our speakers.
Oh, boy.
Mr. LaCastro.
I have a question. Chris, I've got a question for you, or for Mr. McDowell, either one. How many people do you have on the wait list on Ecos? You have 82 units in Ecos. How many are on the wait list?
I don't have an exact number, but it's well into the over 100. I know last time.
Oh, it's way over 100.
Way over 100.
Yeah.
I heard it was 300 last time, 290 something.
Yeah, I heard it was. I heard it was close to the 300 range. I was just wondering if it. I mean, and you were almost full. I know that you still had some empty units, but I think you're hovering around. I mean, we know it's not 50.
It was empty only because we physically couldn't move
Right.
in, but the leases were in place. The residents were certified for occupancy, so it was effectively full before we even received our certificate of occupancy.
I mean, I've been, famous for saying this before. Sometimes you have to vote for the thing that you hate the least. There's things that I have concerns about this project, and they're all traffic related and density related. I can appreciate the citizens that come up and go, "Wow, I'm all for affordable housing, but not on this beautiful piece of property. Just let it sit. Find another spot for it." Okay, well, every piece of green space has a salamander on it. It has plants on it. It's all of Collier County was once preserve. I mean, look at Hammock Bay and Fiddler's Creek. What do you think that was? That was all mangroves that everybody said was unbuildable, and now look what's on there. We've talked up here about the importance of affordable housing and using the county housing money wisely with a company that has a great track record and not wasting it. To me, you're not going to get much better than this. So I might call Trinity back up here at some point to just talk us through. Is there anything that we're missing on the traffic piece and it might just take more analysis, so it might not have the answer now, but that's a heavy populated area of big time workforce people. You're not building this thing in Port Royal. You're building it in East Naples, where there's a big workforce there. I can see you're going to have a huge wait list for this, regardless of if we approved it immediately. And so I can think of more things I like about it than I don't. I love the changes that you made. That's what I was hoping for. I had heard that the height and the density had changed, and that must have been bad info, because you answered it perfectly. Once you apply, then you're sort of stuck there. So reducing the footprint, maybe alleviating the traffic. I'm not a supporter of turning the preserve into a parking lot, so that I plant that in Trinity's mind and just say, are we missing something else that we could do, either in the way egress and ingress works, and to create more parking spots if we think we need them. But the preserve's the preserve. It's one of the big pluses, that one of the things you changed, and so starting to eat away at that. Maybe in a smaller amount, it's not a big deal, but I'd hate to see like half of that taken away. Then you've sort of alleviated the point. And then lastly, I'll just say to Mr. McDowell, it must be you must have a great sense of pride when you hear people that are living in Ecos come up here totally unsolicited, thanking you for all that you've done. Elizabeth Ratty, she's in the center of everything in Collier County, so she hasn't spoken here much, but lately, but she knows what she's talking about, and you're certainly paddling in the direction that we need. Is this the location? Is this the size? Is this the parking lot? Is Collier Boulevard busy? All of those things are anything. You build anything, it's gonna add traffic. I mean, there were people that didn't want Lele Resort, I'm sure. And then when it was built, all the people that lived in it were glad that the people who hated it lost. But this is something a bit different. And to have the ability to have basically 100% affordable housing type community, we're not going to get many of these chances. And there's not magic land somewhere, to address the one citizen that said, wow, everything's perfect about this, but not in our backyard kind of thing. We sort of know the map. You know the map. You didn't just arbitrarily pick this piece of property. It came together because of the county and the money and all of those things. So, it may not be perfect. And every time there's an accident, doesn't mean that the road's improperly designed. I mean, there's accidents that happen all over the place. And as I was telling Rick when he was in my office, every time there's an accident, we don't put up a stoplight or close the road. And so, but we want it to be safe. And so that's where I would say maybe Trinity, you could give us your thoughts, sort of having heard that. Those are my real concerns. I really like the ability to bring another Ecos type project in an area where the wait list is going to be huge instantaneously. But what are your thoughts? Are they missing anything on traffic, density, ingress, egress, and any of those things that you think could take more analysis, or that you have bigger concerns on, or could take a redesign or a second look, not to slow the project down, but to make the end result better, smarter, faster, cheap, all those things?
Once again, for the record, Trinity Scott, Transportation Management Services Department head. Sir, they are going to have to go through some significant analysis with the Florida Department of Transportation that and our staff is going to look at that as well. We're going to look at turn lanes. We're going to look at where they line up as far as their driveway. All of those things are going to be taken into consideration. That's in the next step when they actually come in for the site development plan, and they're sitting down with that with that methodology meeting with the Florida Department of Transportation and applying for that permit. All of you have experienced the rigorous analysis that the Florida Department of Transportation required, no different than the rigorous analysis that we would require if we were permitting this as well. But we've all been through that when we want a traffic signal someplace, or we want a median opening, or something modified. FDOT is going to look at this and go through all of that analysis, and they will require, based on their regulations, what is necessary. As I said earlier, if I look at this, I would say a right turn lane is necessary for this development. It's not shown right now, but that doesn't mean that they don't have the opportunity to be able to add that in. So those are things that will come about as part of that analysis with the Florida Department of Transportation. Looking at the distance of Tower Road compared to Henderson Creek Drive, is there sufficient space to be able to get an additional left turn lane in if FDOT allows that opening where it is? Those are all things that are going to be taken into consideration. So what I would say is it's a great start, but we need to have that analysis with FDOT.
If FDOT sat down and said, wow, in order for us to approve this or to like it, these 5 things would have to happen, and 3 of them, McDowell says, yeah, we agree to, and then FDOT says, well, and then the other 2 aren't doable. You don't have enough space. Like, you know, there's that kind of conflict. Does this whole project then, it stops, right? I mean, because there, like you said, there's still
FDOT
some
is the
approvals.
permitting authority to provide the driveway access there. So
Without that, then it doesn't
if
get built.
FDOT says these 5 things must be done for safety and for the type of development that they're proposing and for, you know, the density that they're proposing, et cetera, they will be required to do those things in order to be able to receive a permit from the Florida Department of Transportation.
But sometimes FDOT will say, in order to make this project acceptable, you would have to do this, but you don't have enough acreage to do it. You know, I'm just thinking of one example in District 1 that goes way back, and it was something that I was talking to FDOT about, and it was, well, we'd like to do A, B, C, D, and E, but D and E actually wasn't possible, you know, it just, so is there a possibility of running into that? Like when you look at this project, do you think there's some showstoppers here that FDOT might say, you know,
No, actually, I don't. I look at this as it's currently zoned commercial. And if they were going to come in with commercial, they would go through this exact same process with FDOT, and FDOT would do that analysis, and they would add, perhaps that's deceleration lanes, perhaps it's you know, left turning movements, whatever. FDOT will look at all of that analysis. It may mean that FDOT wants to do something different and push the traffic further down to make a U-turn. Those will all be things that they look at as part of that analysis. It looks like right now their ingress and egress is lining up with Tower Road, which if there was ever a possibility for a signal, that's the best opportunity to have that. It is very close to the other signals, though. It certainly wouldn't meet the spacing requirements, but it's not unheard of. But the Florida Department of Transportation is not going to go in, most likely saying, signal here. They're going to say, we're going to look at all the safety improvements that need to be done as part of this.
And I'll just tell the citizens that are listening, and Trinity knows that she works with FDOT regularly. FDOT's very aggressive at taking a look at these things, so they don't rubber stamp anything. And so, but what I'm hearing from you, Trinity, and you don't have a crystal ball, but you don't anticipate that FDOT's going to come up with something that's not doable here. As you're looking at this, there's some tweaks, and FDOT's obviously needs to be the final approval before the permitting, and McDowell might have to suck up some investment by FDOT saying, hey, you need an extra lane here or something like that. But you know, just from with your expertise, you don't see something that looks like a gigantic showstopper or it's going to come to a screeching halt.
I'm not seeing that. I think that FDOT is going to look at this in the present day condition, and they're also going to look at what they're proposing to do with the modified condition with their construction project, and will make the determinations of what's necessary. It may change with the future construction project, but they will look at the present day conditions, and since that project is outside the 5-year work program, will essentially require McDowell to do whatever improvements are necessary that FDOT deems necessary.
Mr. Alberti asked a whole host of questions. Did somebody write those down and could come to the podium and start knocking those out? I wrote a few down, but I hope you did as well. Cormac, what do you got?
Again, for the record, Cormac Giblin, I think one of the questions was, again, Commissioner McDaniel answered it pretty well, but the Live Local allows you to go to the highest zoned or built building within 1 mile. Immediately adjacent to this parcel is a parcel that is zoned C4, and that is allowed to go to 75 feet. So under Live Local, they could go to 75 feet by right. Another question was, is there somewhere else that they could find land and we could purchase for affordable housing? Commissioner Hall knows that we are looking every day. We've had the application open to developers for now over a year. This is the first one that has kind of checked all the boxes and dotted all the I's to get to this point. We're open for business if anyone is looking. After this, we'll have another 18 million or 17 million to go. So we are looking everywhere. This is one, we've looked at several applications thus far. They've all been kind of weeded themselves out due to feasibility. This one has gotten this far. I think another question was regarding the scoring of the initial application. The initial application was deemed staff was constrained, you remember this conversation from the meeting in January. Staff was constrained from recommending approval of this for surtax because it was in the coastal high hazard area. We have a comprehensive plan that has many different elements to it. We have a housing element, we have a coastal element. They have sometimes some competing priorities, and staff wasn't in a position to tell or to recommend to the board which one of those priorities took precedent. So we said we were constrained from making a recommendation of approval. Instead, we brought it to the AHAC, and that board said that they, of course, were in favor of siding with the affordable housing element. We brought it to the surtax Citizens Advisory Committee. That board also fell in favor of the housing, and then ultimately you in your decision on the 23rd weighed those two elements and sided with the housing element as well. So that's the reason for the lower score and the initial staff being constrained from making a recommendation. I think those are the questions that I wrote down. The elevation, it's got the building, the first floor will have to be at BFE +1. That area, the new flood maps have just gone into effect, so the site will be significantly raised. The stormwater plan will be required to retain all of any water that falls on that property will need to be treated and retain on that water and meet the discharge rate that's allowed.
I was telling Citizen Rick when he was in my office when he was talking about runoff, and he's like, wow, those canals fill up really quickly. And I hear this a lot from citizens, and I think Trinity and Jamie Cook are the ones that taught me. I know that's what they're supposed to do. So sometimes we get calls and people are like, wow, the canal is all the way up to the top. And it's like, or the, what's the other word for it? Not necessarily canal, but.
Ditch.
Yeah, well, you say ditch. Yeah, swale. Swale was the word I was looking for. But they get a little bit nervous, and it's like, no, that's why it's there. And we have the ability to make sure it doesn't overflow and move water around and things like that. But, okay, thank you.
A couple more questions. Ms. Williams, I think, or I'm sorry, Ms. Jackie, had a question about ESP and veterans. I think you'll be happy to know that your planning commission is already addressing this issue as they move forward with new essential service personnel certifications. They're currently looking at adding veterans to that host of
Could it be added to this project, or it's?
We can work that out in the developer agreement. We'll bring that up.
Track that with you, because when you look at income or first responders, she brings up a good point that sometimes veterans, they might meet the income level, so it's not to say there won't be veterans in that building, but to specifically, say, just like we do with teachers and things like that, is something that I think we want to continue to consider aggressively every time. Okay, thank you, sir.
And then the last thing was, again, this recommendation to purchase will only come back to you once they've completed their site development plan approval, once all the other agencies have deemed it to be built to code, built it to safe, reliable, environmentally friendly, however you want to say that their codes apply. But that's the only time we will bring it back to you for the actual purchase.
Commissioner McDaniel.
I made notes this time just so when it came my turn to speak, I'd be able to remember. Chris, just to share, because there's oftentimes priority put on affordable housing affordability over everything. How long, if the world spins well and you get through all of these permitting agencies, how long before we see a CO? I just want the public to hear this.
I'll start with the first major step, and that's commencing construction.
No, CO.
And then
if your world revolves and everything goes well, when will we have?
It'll be about 2.5 years.
And that's if everything goes well.
That's with everybody working cooperatively and everything checking out in our conceptual plan to come to fruition.
I want the community to hear that, because there's a known need for housing affordability, but this need cannot be overshadowed by the environmental concerns, by the concern, the coastal high hazard issue, the concerns of the neighborhood. This need cannot overshadow the certain issues that are revolving around this particular site. This is a constrained site. I applaud you when I asked, and I thank my colleagues for allowing me for allowing us to have this reconsideration. I know a lot of them feel like it's a fire drill, but you've addressed a lot of those issues. But one of the things that I brought up at the beginning was our spending sales tax money on mobile home zone land that isn't part of the Live Local Act. That's a separate piece of property that's next door that's now you've converted that into a preserve area for a buffer between your neighbors and yourself. But I think maybe at some particular process, we need to start looking. I mean, we have a letter here from our housing department that scored this development, didn't make the list, but they pursued. They went through the Affordable Housing Committee, they went through the Sales Tax Committee, and are now before us, and they didn't make the cut. So I'm not talking that we can just go anywhere and build anything along the way, but I think from a staffing standpoint, from our staff standpoint, a lot of these things weren't brought to me and I'm looking at you because you're standing there, but I'm also looking at the folks that are behind you. A lot of these things weren't brought to me when this project was brought to us last month, which is why I asked for that reconsideration. My question to you is, or maybe it has to be answered by Jamie Cook, and I do want Mike Bosey to come up front, please, if you can. What happens if the economically feasible vaulting system fails?
Else physically?
Sir?
Else physically, like breaks?
What happens if it's not supporting the water quality requisite? We can't stop you.
You wouldn't get the permit at that point.
I understand that. What happens if you have a permit, you demonstrate that your system works, and then it chooses to not work for some unknown reason? How do we stop you from discharging once you're there?
That becomes a code issue both with Collier County and with the state of Florida at that point.
Okay. That doesn't answer my question. How the facility is built.
Correct. But at that point, if it were to fail, typically when a project is using vaulting, we recommend additional maintenance measures to ensure that it is working properly. But if it were to fail, it becomes a code enforcement issue, both with Collier County and with the state of Florida at that point.
Okay. And just to expand on the ramifications if that were to happen, and this is why we're not looking at doing any shoddy work, because we have an obligation, a guarantee that if that were to happen, we're in default under our various covenants with our financial partners, and there are significant punitive measures in place if we default within those partnership agreements and loan documents. So there's a lot of hooks in us.
In permitting, I'm aware. I'm all aware about the improper discharge of not quality of sufficient quality of water. You're in danger of very, very severe fines with the EPA and the DEP. Mr. Bosey? And I can't remember right off the top of my head, how big a piece of property is this site-wise?
I believe the
7.5
acres.
About 7.5 acres, and it's zone C3 right now.
The majority.
The entire site is 7.5 acres. 2.5 or so is the mobile home.
1.7 is the mobile home.
Okay, so how many square feet of commercial could be constructed on this under the current underlying property rights?
I mean, if they were to do a 2-story office building, they could probably get 120,000 square feet.
Okay.
But I'm not a site designer.
I understand that. And you weren't planning on this. You and I didn't talk about this yesterday when we were discussing this. But one of the things that I'd like to see as we're going through this process is a comparison with the underlying land use and the impact with regard to traffic and ingress and egress. That then becomes a collector. It's a different type of traffic drawer than this particular development, which will throw 300, 260 cars out in the morning and 260 cars back at night. So if you could, because there's more to this as we go forward, but if you could, I'd like to know what the underlying property, on any of the developments that come forward, I'd like to know what those underlying impacts are, just as a comparison.
Understood.
I want to take just a second and clear up Rick's question and the question about staff scoring. This came to us at the AHAC, and staff came up with some rules, some criteria for projects to meet the surtax money. And because they came up with those rules, they didn't have the ability to determine if someone had the ability or the wherewithal to mitigate those things. They just strictly had their rules. And because of that, the score came back at 62. Once I explained to the AHAC that staff had to stick to the rules that they had, then now that we can consider those rules, we can consider if the developer has the ability and the will and the know-how to mitigate those circumstances that caused the score to be low. And we determined that they had already done it on one project and it was not going to be an issue to do it on the next. That's why the scoring issue was low. So I hope that clears it up. And I think we have a project and a developer who's taking all of the risk. They've got to meet all of these hoops. They've got to get everything done, and it's on them to do it. And if they don't, then we're out of the woods on this. But for government to get out of the way and to allow affordable housing, the only deal that we've had to come forth with this surtax money, and we're scrutinizing it, I feel like we're in the way on it. And Commissioner Colwell has a comment, and then Commissioner Castro, and then we're going to take a court reporter break.
Thank you, Chairman. I just noticed in some of the comments, I don't know if Mr. Cormack or maybe even Chris can clear this up, but I think some people are confused, and just as for informational purposes to the citizens, that the Live Local Act is totally separate. It's not part of I heard somebody make the statement, Live Local Act money, our Live Local Act money. It's the surtax money that was set aside, the $20 million. But can you just give them the difference between Live Local, which is a state the governor signed into law?
Sure. The Live Local Act is a act passed by the governor last year that deals primarily with the zoning, the site development regulations. There's some funding in it. The advantage on this site is that any site that is already zoned commercial, industrial, or mixed use is automatically entitled to the highest density approved in the county and the highest height approved or built within 1 mile of that site. And so this site being C3, it qualifies for use of that act. The thinking behind it is that it's already zoned C3. There's already hundreds of commercial uses that can go on that site by right today. And commercial is a higher traffic generator than residential. And so it'd be essentially a down zoning in the eyes of the state legislature to allow residential to go on any commercial, industrial, or mixed-use site. Now, the state surtax money is workforce housing land acquisition was a community priority put into that funding, and there was a pot of $20 million that was collected over the last 6 years to be used specifically for workforce housing land acquisition. That does not need to be used only on a project that also exercises Live Local. That can be any parcel of land in the county. And as the Commissioner Hall alluded to, we've written a set of guidelines on which properties, how we will review those properties. We're typically looking for properties that are ready to go, shovel-ready properties, would score much higher in our evaluation criteria. This being Live Local makes that, by definition, shovel-ready. So that's the difference between the Live Local Act and the surtax funding.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to make sure the citizens understood that. This is pretty much a by right build, and it kind of takes a lot of the responsibility off us because the governor signed it into law and basically supersedes our local authority over it.
That's correct, Commissioner. We're only here today because they're asking for the $3.75 million to purchase the land. If they weren't looking for that, they could go to SDP and never be before any public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Corman.
Commissioner LaCastro.
Well, the first thing I wrote down here was to explain the scoring, and Commissioner Hall really did that expertly, because I knew it really wasn't apples to apples. It was old score and all that, so I appreciate you bringing that up. The second thing was commercial could go on there, but Cormac brought it up before I even asked it, is commercial generates more traffic. I'm concerned about the traffic and the ingress and egress, but put a two-story shopping mall there with another Skillets and a Jersey Mike's and whatever, and see what that looks like. And I can tell you, all the commissioners know this, but I do drive by that area every day. We've got a lot of empty commercial sitting right now. The big outlet mall that's sitting empty. Steinmart went out of business. There's quite a few other strip malls that have empty commercial. So trying to find cohesiveness and balance in between housing, regardless of what it looks like, and commercial is what we find in that area. It's not hurting for more commercial right now. It doesn't mean we can't use quality restaurants, and there's some chatter going on that down the road and around the corner there might be some big things coming and whatnot, but it's not like we're screaming for another strip mall right there. And then, like you said, Cormac, you put that there, and now you've got even worse traffic problems. Commissioner Hall's starting to coin a phrase that we're standing in the way. I like that. I don't want to stand in the way of this. There's a couple of things that are of concern, but FDOT is going to flush a lot of those out. We're going to aggressively work with them, just like Trinity Scott said. So it's not like this is a rubber stamp. They're coming to us for the money right now. There's still a few unanswered questions, and also it doesn't mean that citizens can't continue to have a voice and help us refine this. But I would really hate for us to turn our backs on this and not move forward. So I'm a strong approver of it. I don't know that we need to take a break unless the commissioners, have a question.
We'll go to Commissioner McDaniel. This is his deal, so we'll let you make a motion as you seem necessary.
Yeah, I still have reservations. And I apologize to you if you feel like I'm in the way. But
You get to feel however you want.
yeah, it's true. That's true. There's still a lot, there again, there's still a lot we have to say about this particular development. We are handcuffed by the live local law, but on the same token, we are not handcuffed by the expenditure of the sales tax money that we've collected for and on behalf of housing affordability. And I have reservations. I have had reservations with this site because it's constrained. We can address a lot of the things, but I also know density is the key to success in housing affordability. It's a catch-22. So I have no other comments. Commissioner Saunders is lit up.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to make a motion to move forward with this. I'm not sure what the proper wording is. And along with the funding. And the reason is they can build this project without our funding. We wouldn't be here talking to them. The only reason we want to put the funding in is because it lowers what the rentals are going to be. So we're going to get, 30% of AMI? There's a whole list of
30, 50, and 80.
Yeah. They can go in and build this project, I believe, at 120% and 100% of AMI. Without our funds, that'd be a very nice project for them. If we put the $3.7 million in to buy the land, we own the land going forward, and the rents are going to be much, much lower to accommodate folks that are waiting on us in our restaurants, serving us, cutting our grass, doing all those things. So I'm going to make a motion to move forward with this. Now, if there's a problem down the road, we can deal with it. But they've got a project that they can build right now without us. We continue with the funding. We have a much better project for the workforce and other folks in this community, the veterans, folks like that that are on fixed income. So that's why I'm moving forward to support this.
I'd like to second that motion.
So we have a motion to move forward with the surtax money approval and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. So we'll take a court reporter break. It's basically 5 till 5. We'll see you back at 5:15.
That's true. That's the way I.
Chair, you have a live mic.
All right, great. At Commissioner Saunders' request, he would like to do his commissioner comments first, and then he had,
Oh, after we finish the two business items, if we,
okay. I thought you wanted to do it now.
appreciate that.
Okay.
They're not-
All right, so we'll do 13A.
Yes, sir. We're going to jump to item 13A. This is a recommendation to appoint 2 commissioners as regular members, 3 commissioners as alternate members, and ratification of appointed citizen member and alternate citizen member for a 1-year period on the Value Adjustment Board. Mr. Derek Johnson is here to present. Sorry, I don't know your title.
Finance Director, but today, Derek Johnson here before you as Administrator to the Value Adjustment Board. Our ask of you today is for 2 commissioners to come to the VAB meeting. There'll be 2 meetings over the course of a year, about an hour each. I'm pretty sure that's all the ask will be, and to ratify our citizen members. And with that, I can take any questions that you have.
Who's doing it now?
Commissioners Saunders and Kowal.
I don't have any problem continuing to do it.
Yeah, I don't either.
All right.
Nominated.
All right.
Second.
Moved and seconded for them to say the same. All in favor? Aye.
Thank you so much.
Do you need the ratification of your citizen also, or is it?
Was that included in the motion?
Yeah, of course.
Yes.
Very good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, that takes us back to item 11A. This is a recommendation to consider a request by Rural Neighborhood, Inc. and Renaissance Hall at Old Course, LLC for an extension of the financing commitment deadline to March 26, 2024, and approve the second extension to financing commitment deadline in the developer agreement and lease for the Golden Gate Golf Course Housing Project. Mr. Ed Finn, Deputy County Manager, is here to begin the conversation.
Thank you,
for
Ms.
President.
Patterson. Edward Finn, Deputy County Manager. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I know Ed's getting ready to say something. This is just an extension.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to approve that unless there's some.
No, I'll second it. I didn't want to go down a rabbit trail with all the other moving parts on this project. This is just the extension, so I agree. I would second that motion unless somebody had a question.
All in favor to extend, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Aye.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
Commissioners, that brings us to item 15, Staff and Commission General Communications. Item 15A is public comments on general topics not on the current or future agenda by individuals not already heard during previous public comments in this meeting.
We do have one this evening. Katie Tardif.
I know you're shocked to hear me or see me here, and I'll keep it fast and brief because what I originally intended to say was just thank you so much for the hard work that you do on behalf of the people of Collier County that you represent, whether in your own districts or someone else's district. I'm not going to let that one go, Mr. McDaniel. I also, but I want to add to that. I know you're very hardworking, and it's a shame that more people who live here don't come to these meetings if time permitted them to be able to see and hear the kind of work that you do and the kind of, in this case, all men that you are. It's much, much appreciated. One last thing that I wanted to throw in there after, as I sat through the last piece of discussion about affordable housing, I wish we could do something crazy and wildly almost flamboyant to draw more attention to the depressing and sad state of affairs where the numbers of people who simply just don't make the income needed to afford housing in the place in the county where they work, to see the work that you're doing to push this forward as much as you can. And I hope that perhaps we could one day brainstorm some funky, fun, creative things to draw attention, promote, market, and one last thought to that, not so funky and fun, but we do know there are builders in this county who have gotten away with some pretty shoddy work. And I'm sure that in some ways they're held accountable, but I'm thinking of one in particular right now who built the neighborhood that I live in, and it's costing the owners of the condos in that neighborhood tens of thousands of dollars in assessments now to do work, some of which would have been needed anyway, but some of which is absolutely directly related to workmanship issues that, because the ownership was turned over to the owners some years ago now, falls entirely on the shoulders of the owners. It seems to me there must be a way to hold those kinds of builders accountable, and I'm going to just leave it at that for now and end back on a high note. Thank you for all that you do, and for all of the support staff in this room. You guys are awesome. Thank you, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
Thank you.
County Manager.
Commissioners, that brings us to we have no staff project updates. So that brings us to item 15C, staff and commission general communications. We have nothing, but thank you for the good meeting. County Attorney.
Nothing as well.
Mr. Saunders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize to the board. As soon as I finish mine, I'm going to scoot out because I'm late for an event that I need to be appearing at. I got a couple items. The first one, we've all made a real commitment to veterans in this community, and we recognize as today their service, and we recognize our active military folks that live here as well as everywhere. I had a conversation with Dr. Riccadelli yesterday. The school board has made the determination that they do not want to put their vocational education facility in that vacant building at the Golden Gate Golf Course. Now, I actually consider that to be an opportunity for us. I had met about 6 months ago with some folks that have interest in the military museum. They were looking for a home, and they've all contacted us over the months. And we discussed that building, and I told them that was not available just yet, but if it was available, I would let them know. So what I'd like to get the board to do, or at least consider doing, is I would like staff to reach out to the folks that are involved with the military museum and let them know that, if this board is willing, that we have a facility that may very well accomplish the goal of having a really nice museum in close proximity to our veterans nursing home and the other facilities that we're building there for veterans. And the other thing that we can add to this is that would be an opportunity to have a location for veteran service organizations, for all of our county veterans organizations that are scattered around the county. That could be a building for our veterans, for their offices and for meeting place for veterans. That would require an allocation of some funds to make that happen. The museum portion could be funded through tourist development taxes, because we fund our museums through those. So I'd like to see if the board has an appetite, if you will, for reaching out to the museum folks that have the military museum, do some calculations, determine how much space is needed, how much space is available, kind of give us a rough idea of what this type of renovation would run. And I think we can turn this, along with our nursing home there, into a really nice campus for our military folks and our veterans in this community. So that's the ask this evening.
Is that a county asset?
Yes, sir.
I have a question. Why did the school change their mind? I'm just curious. I'm sorry.
Well, the real answer is that they want to be further north because they want to draw kids from Bonita Springs, which quite frankly, I don't think is the mission of our Collier County School District, but that's the reality of it.
There's a small piece of land between our land and that building. Is the easement worked out to get through to and through yet?
I'm not sure what the easement would be. I know we have a full access to 200 parking spaces associated with that. I know the county now owns those tennis courts near the building. So I don't think there's any access issues there, any easement problems, but that's something that real property can let us know.
We'll go through in the exploration process, sure. And the only other proviso, and I mean it's a building that's there. There is a lot of conversion from commercial to residential, so that's something that maybe could be. I know we're we've already allowed for that developer to buy that hotel and convert it to housing affordable units as well. So in the event that the museum doesn't play out, that's a building that we actually already own and maybe could be looked at for housing.
That would be my thoughts. Instead of just automatically jumping in on a museum, that would be nice. The need is greater for housing. And just off the bat, I'm not opposed to the museum, but I would like to take a look and see what it would take as far as a developer to come in and spend their money and not ours and to convert it into housing.
So then, Mr. Chairman, it sounds like if we would be directing staff to take a look at alternative uses for that building, which could include a military museum or workforce housing. I don't think it's going to be a structure that would accommodate that, just the way it's built.
I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah, it's really a kind of a wide open building. It's two stories on both ends of it, but it's kind of open in the center.
It's kind of warehousey a little bit, right?
Yeah, it's
be a bar.
Yeah, but it's worth taking a look at it for that purpose. But if it's not usable for that, then I would suggest that we at least consider that military museum there, along with the other veterans offices. So it sounds like staff has that direction. The second thing is I received a letter from a sixth grader, Rhea Pabby. She doesn't know that I'm talking about her or this letter, but it was dealing with the endangered species, one of the orchids, and I forget the name of the orchid, but it's one of the orchids that is almost an endangered species, but it's not yet listed by the federal government as endangered. And she wrote an incredibly thoughtful letter and wanted me to help move along the federal designation of this orchid to be the ghost orchid, to be a protected species. And what I'd like to do, if the board doesn't have an objection, is have our staff, I'll give the letter to our staff, and have them look at that. And perhaps we could draft a letter on her behalf and present it to her and to her school. Again, this is a letter that is really impressive, and I'll make sure everybody gets a copy of it. But
Please do.
I'd like to recognize her for that and see if we can perhaps move that along. I know this particular orchid, there's one out at the Corkscrew Sanctuary, and it only blooms like a couple days out of the year, and it is a real hot topic for people. It gets a lot of publicity. And then thirdly, we had talked about the air purification systems that were being donated by Collier. We have a couple hundred units that have been delivered to the county, so we're in possession of those. And staff is going to be working up a plan to bring back to us on how we can distribute those to not-for-profits and organizations like the Shelter for Abused Women and report back to us. So I just want to let the board know that that's something that's in progress. And Mr. Chairman, I'm going to slip on out and.
I just want to say, so Commissioner Saunders, and you don't need any reminder, but we'll look for those bullets on the VA nursing home, so we're all speaking from the same sheet of music, and we'll follow your lead on sort of the main points so that, you know, we're spreading the word equally.
I'm going to check tomorrow on the status of the $10 million funding that Senator Pasadomo and our local delegation and all of us spoke with folks about a couple of months ago to make sure that that's still moving along. My understanding it's in the budget, but things do change in Tallahassee. So I'll check on that and I'll report back to everybody. And I will have a full report to the board over the next couple of weeks on all the status. All right, thank you.
Have a good rest of your day. Commissioner McDaniel.
Yes, I really only have one. You heard me talking a little bit on the ECOS development with regard to the GMD and the administrative parking reduction. There's I think we have a hole in our land development code with the requisites of the parking requirements that are currently within our land development code. You heard that this developer has a 17% deficit, And so just a brief explanation. Under the current LDC, a one-bedroom land development code, a one-bedroom requires one parking space and a half. And then a two-bedroom has one parking space and one other. And a three-bedroom has one parking space and another. And I would like for us to have a hearing and review those parking requisites to make sure that they're sufficient, because I truly believe that it's a hindrance to the economic circumstances that we have going on, not only from the developer's cost standpoint, but also from the being prohibitive for the developments. We have a lot of these at-market developments that aren't as heavily managed as they possibly could be, and the administrative parking reduction that's allowed within our land development code, if a developer shows up and says that a certain percentage justifiably of the development has they're within access to a public transit route, they can get relief, and I think that needs to be reviewed. So if it meets with your approval, then I'd like to do that.
I don't see any reason why we can't. So you're saying you think it's prohibitive? The way it is now is?
It's a detriment the way that it currently is right now.
I totally agree. I think it's on the developer. I think that ought to be up to them. But yeah, we can talk about it.
Well, and that's the case. The APR allows for a developer to come to our staff after we've approved a development. We're not necessarily aware that there's a deficit. They've got a deficit because they don't have enough land to accommodate the parking that requisites that are there, and all they have to do is say, well, the people can walk to that. These people are at 50% of AMI or 80% of AMI, and then our AMI standards that we have are of 100,000 plus. Everybody has a car.
They ultimately have to live with not enough parking if there's not. So.
Well, then we do. And I'll cite an example of Orange Blossom as a development on the north side of Oil Well Road that's all at market, and they've got a terrible parking constraint, and it's been going on for quite some time. So that's the reason I'm asking to have a look at it.
Sure. Commissioner LaCastro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Two quick things. One for Ms. Scott in the back, and you don't have to come up. It goes without saying when we were talking about that ECOS project, the McDowell project. We'll see how it moves forward, and obviously we'll work aggressively with FDOT. But mass transit, CAT, and I think there is a stop right there anyway, but it reminded me, and I told one of the citizens here, there's a bus stop in front of the JW Marriott. And I remember when I first got elected, the CEO at the time, Rick, came to me and said, you know, your bus stops there 30 minutes before actually our staff is dismissed. So our housekeepers leave the hotel 30 minutes early, the ones that take the bus. And it was, and the housekeepers weren't happy about that. They were like, oh, I wish the bus was, and you know, I said to them, we control the pickup and the drop-off times. So we made that immediate switch with your predecessor. That would be a perfect example there where, you know, and I know that's way down the road, you know, we don't even have shovels going in the ground for 2.5 years, where we would want to make sure that that was matched, you know, that we knew what the workforce, you know, the bulk of the people were leaving and coming back, and to help encourage people to not take their vehicles, or those that don't have vehicles. A lot of the workforce housing people there do rely on mass transit. So, I mean, I know that's an obvious thing, but we didn't really talk about it. And then lastly, he's not here, so he's probably somewhere having a cold one, but Mr. Bosey deserves a little bit of credit today. I mean, that guy had his bulletproof vest on here and was getting, interrogated and cross-examined one-on-one, and we know how fun that is. So I was hoping he would be here, but I think, he really stood up to the questions. It just shows how, regardless of how the vote turns out, really good, healthy discussion. And as I said, I was throwing some thanks to Mr. French, who I believe is the one that said to me before Mr. Bosey was hired, he says, oh, you're going to really like this guy. He's got a lot of depth. He was a superstar on our staff, left for a little bit. And I mean, not a lot of people could sit up there off the top of their head and really take a lot of that. And he always gives us really good feedback the day prior to this meeting as well in all our offices. So wherever he is, he's probably laying down somewhere. Good on him for helping us steer that that discussion and understand it and package it properly. But thank you for that, Mike. That's all I have. Thank you.
Mr. Kowal.
I'm feeling a little under the weather, so I'm just going to leave it.
You made it.
Made it at the end.
All right, I have no comments. Good day today. Thanks for the meeting. And with that, we're adjourned.